Attention, stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
So I have committed to my next car being fully electric and to not getting a new car until then. So that my car's long in the tooth. I've got 130,000 miles on my vehicle, and and I keep it in decent shape. It's a little dirtier than I'd like it. I'm a busy guy that does a lot of road trips. And I've had hybrids in the past.
I'm not going to touch your dirty car.
Thanks. I've had hybrids in the past, but I've never had a fully electric car. So, and I am on the list for the Cybertruck because I think first of all, it's way cheaper than I think it should be. And
is it like a Transformer?
No, it isn't. But it looks a lot like something from a 8-bit video game in the 80s.
Oh,
it has a very I love the 80s
Cybertruck.
I feel like I could jump out of it dressed, cosplaying Chuck Norris in Delta Force, and it would work.
Ooh, you totally could. You do not need many pixels for this thing.
No, you do not. And I have friends who have Teslas and the like, and I carry a lot of gear, so having that ability, being able to put an amp in the back of it is kind of crucial. So, and with the solar panels on top of it, so it charges while it sits, would be great. So that's my thing. Now there's a lot of options out there. By the time I get around to doing it, I very well may, there may be something better that's an option. But right now, that's the front runner. And you're too tall for my screen, Johnny. I'm like
sorry. I was adjusting my butt.
That happens. But I don't know when the methane powered cars come, but we hope soon. Johnny Million. Here we go. So let's take some calls though. 773-763-9278. Somebody in the chat said, of course, Hal Sparks would want a Cybertruck. Who do we have on the line, Chicago?
First up is Steve from the Gold Coast.
Excellent.
There you go.
Hey, Steve. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Yes, I want to make a couple of points. One, I think you're dead on with regard to linking these things to American foreign policy, energy, how we move forward. And make no mistake, we can become energy independent and we can move to renewable fuels, but we're still going to have a great deal of debt to pay in terms of the situation that we helped to create in the Gulf and so forth. Because if you think that Saudi Arabia is a problem now, wait until, the only viable resource that they have, the thing that creates wealth and allows people to drive around in Ferraris and McLarens disappears or is worthless. What happens then to that society? How many more radicals are you going to create? It's very difficult to get somebody to strap on a suicide vest when they're driving a Bugatti. Are you out of your mind? I've got a Bugatti. I'm not about to blow myself up. I'm reminded of that scene in Syriana where Matt Damon's talking to a progressive prince and basically giving him an honest view of what the world considers to be that part of the globe. And, you guys were living in the desert 100 years ago, chopping each other's heads off, and that's exactly what you're going to be 100 years from now. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of brutal, but in many ways, it's reflective of what many people think. That,
even Russia's a good example of that as well, because Russia's entire economy, its kleptocracy is a petrochemical kleptocracy. It's what it's run on. And once we shun that forever, once we're no longer a part of that, the geopolitical blowback will be increasingly seen. And this is part of the shift that you're seeing in the Republicans holding their nose and letting stuff get through, and Democrats fighting actively for it, of getting us on renewables, getting us to electric cars and the like as fast as possible. Because the geopolitical upheavals that are going to come from climate change, that are inevitable at this point because we have made so much damage, and it's even when we fix stuff or better it, it's going to take a long time to reset it. And much like you're talking about the geopolitical blowback from wars for oil in the past, a lot of that's going to be felt in Europe and in Russia, will be the fights between China and Russia and Afghanistan and the territories in that area fighting over a limited resource that fewer and fewer people use. And if we in the United States have all but weaned off we have weaned off foreign sources, but we are no longer playing in the sandbox of the geopolitical worth of oil, which is within the next 10 years, by the way. Just count on it. And you know that I know where you're getting to some degree with this too, is that the Saudis hit peak oil a long time ago. There's an argument that they have none left, that they are a monetary monstrosity, not a petrochemical monstrosity the way they were, that they've gotten through all the oil they have control of. And now they're trying to, through terrorism and other stuff, get control of more resources because...
That's the conundrum.
Yes.
That's the conundrum of the oil-producing world, is that, okay, so overproduce, drive down price, okay, that's a bad thing for us. Don't let it sit in the ground as alternative renewable fuels are created. We could be left with the largest pit of worthless junk in the world, because that's what oil will be down the road. So,
imagine the Saudis trying to maintain their level of wealth and out of plastics. Out of the, imagine Middle East, Dubai, all that place run completely on plastics factories. By the way, as we also in the West start moving away from plastics, and we try to do reclaimable plastics and the like, we're going to move away from that stuff as well. This will be a bump in human history, right?
And I will say that, to be fair, and I get into debates with some of my more radical environmentalist friends on this, absolutely I concede that we need to be moving in that direction. Now, at the same time, they will give you this argument, we have done this to our planet. Yes, we have. But as you pointed out, what was the alternative a century ago? Were you going to tell, America, Europe, some of the other places, oh, by the way, that standard of living that we've seen improving, extending life, lowering hunger and starvation, this sort of thing. Oh, we're just going to stop it because, we're having this adverse effect on the planet. Nobody was going to go for that. But instead, there's a trade-off, and now we can do something about it. But the idea that had we known 2 centuries ago, would we have done anything different? I would argue largely no. No. Even today, plug in your electric car, guess what? It doesn't come from the electric ferry. A lot of it is still generated by coal and oil and fossil fuels. So, we're not there yet. I think we can get there, though. Yeah, we transition through history, and we can't pretend. I've always said, and I can't say how I say it on the radio the way I normally say it, but if we weren't a-holes yesterday, we wouldn't need tomorrow. And people, societies, technologies, evolve just like people do, just like animals do. There's a change over time, hopefully for the better. You have to manage that change. But this idea that we can somehow look back at the past like they should have known is an absurdity. And understand that somebody in the future's kid is going to look back at us and go, wait, they made batteries out of lithium? What was that? But it was the best possibility, and it transitioned us out of a more toxic way. Almost 8 billion people in the world. Okay, how many of those would you have been willing to sacrifice because they never would have been alive? Yes. And that home that you grew up in, were you willing to grow up in one half the size and no access to education? I would even go so far as to say when oil collapses, when it is no longer a viable monetary source that, as far as the return on investment, the ROI, once that turns on its head and it's not worth it to get out of the ground, but there are still massive amounts of vehicles all over the world that only run on it, right? When the rest of the world has moved on from that technology, we're going to lose 1 billion humans on this planet. There are 1 billion human beings, largely in Africa, India, and China, but South America as well, areas where cars in those areas, vehicles that used to bring food aid and the like, no longer exist. And massive amounts of starvation will happen because those transportation methodologies will vanish in a matter of years. It will sneak up on us, and there will be we will be flying as much food aid as we can into certain areas, but it will be overwhelmed. And that trade-off
that came with was that those billion lives. And you have to go, well, to save the environment, do we lose $1 billion to save $3 billion over time? Those kind of decisions. It's the shoot the hostage argument over time on a massive scale. So we need to be more forgiving about the people behind us making that time,
Right, and unfortunately, you're going to have a hard time talking, saying this to people who refuse to acknowledge that we are part of the people who created this crisis. It's not somebody who was, building a campfire somewhere in Central Asia. It was the industrialized West, because this is a cumulative effect CO2 and other greenhouse gases have in terms of the atmosphere. So, what your grandparents did when they were working in that coal mine or in that steel plant in Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Chicago, that's what's creating global warming that's affecting the people who are the poorest in the world. We, who are the wealthiest countries, created this issue, not the poor people. Right. So when something happens to them, we're going to have to assume some of that responsibility. But it's hard to make that argument. The Republicans are going to stand up and say, well, why should Americans be paying for this? Because the science says that we are the ones who created it.
Right, but they'll also push back that there are only that many people alive because this technology existed, and that their adaptation of it on a looser scale that's more polluting than what we ended up coming to terms of, because we had bigger cities, more people close together, and we looked up at the sky and it was turning brown, and we're like, wow, this is going to wipe us out, so we better start working on it. And the trickle of that technology moving across the earth is very slow, especially where it's been stiff-armed by the petroleum companies over the years. That's where I think a lot of that goes. The people who were aware and did nothing, or kept it from the public, or made sure that certain technologies didn't, the perfect spark plug, that old argument.
Right, and that's an excellent point, and that's a great point, because a century ago, it simply wasn't there, the technology. But could we be 20, 30 years ahead of where we are now?
Yes.
Were it not for the role of public policy by the fossil fuel industry, retarding the development of electric cars, of other technologies. I mean,
no question.
For those not old enough to remember, I mean, watch what killed the electric car.
Exactly.
Decades ago.
Yes,
we were on the verge of doing something important.
That's right. We went over into the break. I appreciate it, Steve. I wanted to let you finish that thought. So thanks for calling in, brother. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.